What up, man? How you doing? So I worked all week on that intro, and I'm so excited about it. I don't know why, but it makes me think of it's one of those Iron Man movies. I think it's the guy with the Russian that's fighting Robert Downey Jr.'s character, and he's doing his little like
That's the second one.
expo, and he's like dancing. Like that's what I that's my inspiration for that one. So there you go.
I was thinking
Kind of
about
feel
the
like I
Bull in
need
the
a
Water dance movie
mono.
where he's just dancing like this.
What was that, Josh? Go ahead.
I said I kind of well, I wasn't inspired so much by the music, but the videography. I feel like I need a monocle and a polka dot bow tie or something.
I know. Well, the ironic thing is, I found that and made it happen and got all of our logos and stuff in it. And there's not a single tap in the actual intro, but hey, it's
My favorite part is seeing Evan Burke's face on the cap, like on the cork.
a little bit of
One
work.
of the like, wow.
That took
He
some
actually
of
drank that.
my editing skills. Oh wait, no, all of my editing skills. So I'm
Makes you wonder
enjoying
what he
so
actually
much.
drank.
I've got some Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Select. Fun story about this is that I used to believe that this was just like any other Jack Daniel's. It's like, oh, maybe it's got something to it, or it tastes a little bit better. And then I took a bottle of it up when my wife had a bunch of her friends over, and then I came, I took it upstairs to go hang out, read a book or something, have a nice glass of whiskey, and then I came down about 20 minutes later, like schmammered, and I was like, I looked at the bottle and I was like, oh. 130 proof. That makes more sense. It's basically
Oh my
Scotch.
gosh.
So this is good stuff. I love it. What do you got tonight, John?
So right now, first off, a good tip for a good Saturday morning is you get a little bit of Jack Daniels with some maple syrup, and you put that on your pancakes. So that is what I did. I did not serve it to the kids.
That
So
sounds good and slightly alcoholic, but hey, there you go.
bad win. But I've got right now, you can see I've got Isaac Bowman, and this is their bourbon, but it is finished in a port barrel. So it has a lot more of a sweet, kind of almost cherry finish. It's really good.
Well, and then my question for you, Josh, is as the weather is warming up, I know like, you're a big drinker of it was tea and stuff like that, but what do you do in the summer? You can't, I mean, do you jump in, do you still like make your pool cold? Like, what do you do? Do your rituals change? Your habits change?
It's miserable, man. I just don't swim at all in the summer. Just waiting for winter to get here.
It's way too warm. So we live in Florida, and thank you, DeSantis for opening everything up so that we can actually go to the beach. But it's still pretty cold. We went out there yesterday. That's right, a little bit of sunburn, but my kids loved it. They jumped right in. You would have been proud. It was like 60 degrees, and they loved it. So there you go.
Dude, is it just me, or do I feel like people just kind of for the past 7 days, it's like coronavirus never existed. Like everybody, the weather over here has been phenomenal, and everybody is out and about. Everybody's at the playgrounds. Like you wouldn't even think that there was a pandemic at all. Like it had never
the fact
happened.
that people are so socially awkward right now. Like we all have to get our social skills back up. Like people still, like, hey, how you doing? Right? Like
There is that. Like it was kind of funny because I took my girls shopping and they were like pointing at other people's carts, like, "Oh, we like that too. We're like that too." And I'm kind of like, we don't need to do that, pandemic or not. We don't need to do that. But like some of the families were like, yeah, this is it. And they're like really like getting close to my kids too. And you're like, oh, well, you wouldn't do that either, except that you probably have been isolated for a whole year.
Well, and some people are grouchy, like, we're dealing with all of that. And like people are short tempered. I think the biggest thing is that people are not used to having any other perspective. When you've been at home, you're watching the news channels and the movies that you like. You've only got a small group that's around you, and then you go back into the world, and you're talking about did COVID ever exist? I think people have been living in their like silos. Now they're coming out, and there've been some people like, oh, like that was absolutely horrible. What happened? And other people are like, no, it was pretty great. Like it's whether you were introverted or extroverted plays into it. But now as we get back out to society, we have to learn how to interact again and respect each other and all those things. So definitely a lot of growing pains to be able to get back. But I am enjoying. I'm enjoying the weather, enjoying the fact that people are getting out more. It's great. It's exciting, and more folks getting vaccinated is always a good thing. So lots of good.
We're getting some slots for, my mother-in-law vaccinated and that sort of thing. She has to drive about 45 minutes out to get it, but it's so worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, getting into our topic. So one of the fun things too is like as we start to move, out of this whole COVID environment. I mean, I think it's going to be there for years. Like there's still going to be like pockets and spikes and people getting vaccinated and talking about it. But at the same time, it is starting to be something that is more fully understood, not totally, but more fully understood, and it allows us to kind of focus on other things. And for this channel, we started doing this really when COVID started a year ago, and started to pick up, some traction with it. But so much of our channel topics have been dominated by either the election or COVID. And so now we get to kind of get to what John and I really originally envisioned the channel to be, which is getting into some of these deep topics as well and being able to challenge each other and explore. And I think that's what we get to do tonight is, we put out a post just a few minutes ago talking about what is our favorite conservative book. Because we talked Chesterton a couple weeks ago. We talked Lewis. We talked Tolkien, some of these amazing authors. And I was like, why don't we just open it up for any type of conservative book that anybody likes? Because for me, just the importance of some of the books that you see here. This is a picture of some of the books on my bookshelf, that mean a lot to me because they helped build the perspective that I currently have. So
those are some good titles there.
Yeah, you got to turn sideways. Look at it. But the great debate, we've had Yuval Levin on our show. Now, Josh, you've had him on your show. What an amazing guy. The Shadow University, talking about, all kinds of stifling on campus and things like that, way before cancel culture was a term. And then Russell Kirk I'll get into. So I'm curious for you guys, though, because, I respect immensely your perspectives. And, we've had so many good conversations on this show. If you had to pick one right now that truly was the most instrumental or your favorite conservative book, what would that be? You guys kind of told me a preview of that, but I'd love to hear from you again, John. What book has influenced you the most that you would say was conservative in some sense?
Well, Wes, I know we kicked off some of this discussion with Chesterton, Lewis, Tolkien. I am going to kick it back over to Lewis again. With the Abolition of Man, because it was not only instrumental to me and my development, but especially like during a crucial point in my life when I was in college. And if you haven't read the Abolition of Man, for anyone who's watching, its fundamental premise is a modern defense of natural law. And natural law, I believe, is something that is distinctly conservative. And by natural law, we're meaning some of the more classical beliefs, like from Aristotle, from Cicero, from Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, of this just general nature of right and wrong, that there is truth, there is reality, there is some form of objective reality. Whether or not we can attain 100% knowledge of it probably is impossible, but there is some type of objective reality. And there's good and there's evil. And in order to distinguish those things, Lewis gets into a lot of the nitty gritty because he singles out a particular author of an English textbook. And he really brings out this idea of questioning your own education, just because educators have been known to basically forego any sense of believing in the natural law, and what he labels as emotivism. So he criticizes this idea that there's no longer, if you get rid of good and evil, right? You get rid of truth or reality or understanding objectivity, then you can't even say that something is beautiful. You can't even say that a waterfall is beautiful. The first thing that goes is the appreciation of art and the sublime. What ends up happening is that rather than saying that something is beautiful for its intrinsic value, right, of its objective value, you're saying that it's beautiful only because your psychology, it tells more about your psychology than it does about the actual waterfall.
Yeah, I'm reading this book. It's kind of like a counter to postmodernism, right?
And materialism, yeah, very much so. He goes on further to basically talk about this thing called the Tao, which is, that the world is governed by universal principles that transpired like time and space and all of time. but he throws in pretty much most world religions in there, Christianity and Judaism, but also Confucianism and Buddhism and Hinduism. But this is this underlying moral structure that is very apparent to man that might exist in different forms. But the more that you try and get rid of the Tao in your community and in your life, you will try to create an artificial Tao. And when you do that, you're actually stripping humanity of itself in order to mold it into whatever it is that you want. And usually the people who get to mold it are the people that have the power. So that's his ultimate premise, is that by abolishing the Tao, you're abolishing man. And I think one of the quotes is, when you debunk the "it is good," like, harking back to Genesis, then all you have is the "I want." And people are just governed by their whims, by their instincts, and the fads of the times. And so that's what his worry was, and that's what his concern was. And I think that it's true for today. But it certainly shaped my thinking about my education, and it gave me a little bit more of a critical eye whenever my professors were talking. It was like, do I actually believe this? And what do I want to gain out of this? I would even go into certain English literature classes that were about, certain like the new criticism was one of the more popular forms of just, in literature interpretation. And instead of like just turning my head away from it and saying, no, I'm not going to like go with that, I wanted to actually understand it for what it was. Is there any sort of value to be gleaned out of this? Even if I didn't believe that criticism was a path that I wanted to go to with my own understanding of literature. So it gave me just a good way to glean what was nice, what was good for myself, and keep on going.
How about you, Josh? Is this a book you're familiar with? Have you read it before?
Oh yeah, this is one of the. It's hard for me to list. I think I mentioned last time Till We Have Faces was my favorite Lewis book, but beyond my favorite, it's hard for me to list. This is up there though.
Yeah,
I feel like this is kind of like Mere Christianity on steroids, where Mere Christianity is kind of like for a general audience about the objectivity and objective reality or a moral order. This is like, I don't want to say for an academic audience, but it gets deep quickly, and it really answers a lot of the common objections to Lewis's view.
Yeah, I mean,
I like it a lot more than actually Mere Christianity, because it also introduces his argument from reason, where he pretty much shoots down the idea that you can obtain this knowledge of Tao based upon just your instinct and your reasoning. And that's where he criticizes that reasoning is a dead end. You won't be able to get there from nature. It has to be this soul, what we might call the soul, that helps govern your reason.
Yeah, I mean,
that is an extremely conservative idea, by the way, that reason itself is insufficient.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very Burkean too, right? So like talking about the guy he wrote about the sublime, in the same way that C.S. Lewis talks about. He talked about this deep nature that is the fulfillment of man, is being loved by your creator, is the most amazing, fulfilling experience that we can have, is finding our purpose, our place in life, so what it completes our will as well as the will of God. And what a rare and beautiful thing that is to experience it even for a moment, so, and that's a part of Burke that I love, and it connects him, I think, to Lewis in all kinds of interesting ways.
Very much so.
That's a great one, and C.S. Lewis probably wasn't even thinking, conservative or politics or any of that stuff when he was just writing from the heart. And but you're right, John. It's such a great book to think of from that way as well, and connects so many things and gives you fundamental principles that conservatives are going to back up.
It's kind of eerie to compare like his chapter on the abolition of man, and then watching like something like The Social Dilemma, because there's so many comparisons that you can end up making about how people in power end up manipulating humanity themselves. And Lewis usually goes with the idea of propaganda. He didn't really like birth control and contraception, so he uses that as an example. He uses even airplanes as an example of just certain ways that mankind has power over nature. But he says that power over nature, usually without any sort of Tao governance, will lead to mankind manipulating mankind. So you start looking at like The Social Dilemma, and you seeing how, people are the products of social media, and that their minds and their psychology is constantly under this manipulation strategy, usually for profit. You can't help but like see the comparisons and feel, like that C.S. Lewis was on point.
Yeah. How about you? What do you think, Josh? What would be your favorite book? And that's a good one. That's hard to follow.
Yeah, it's hard to follow, and mine might be a little bit more obscure. Wes, I'll be honest. Asking me my favorite book, even if you narrow it down to conservatism, is kind of like asking me my favorite Bible verse.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess the one that I usually pick something obscure nobody expect. Like, what was it? Felix told Paul, "I perceive that much learning doth make thee mad." Usually, pick a verse like that. But anyhow, I decided not to go with The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump, and instead went with The History of the Intellectual Conservative Movement. It's a longer title. It's actually since 1945, I believe. That's not it. There we go. That's it. Since 1945, George H. Nash. I went with this one because not only is it a good book, but I really think it's rather underappreciated. This is almost encyclopedic in nature. Nash does an amazing job, in my view, of presenting the various cases that those that would be, generally speaking, within the conservative world made in a way that's very charitable, in a way where it's really hard to discern, okay, what is his necessarily bias in this? But he's showing how conservatism, in its modern form as we understand it today, was almost non-existent prior to 1945, which I think is very helpful and puts a lot of things in perspective, kind of those wilderness years of what it means to be a conservative, even a Burkean conservative. And it's existed in forms prior to this, of course, but how nascent and recent it is, I think, helps put in perspective what it means to win politically, say, and what it means to maybe temper your expectations. It's also a great book because it takes a more highbrow look at conservative thought leaders. And it's almost a little disheartening sometimes when I read it, because I read about, M. Stanton Evans or Frank Meyer or William F. Buckley or Russell Kirk and all their contributions and the way they fought each other and the way they came together and worked out these ideas and really puzzled through things. And it just feels like a completely different universe from the, when you say Conservatism Inc. today and who you think of as the thought leaders. I know we talk a lot about Edmund Burke in here, but we really have a very proud intellectual tradition in the United States of amazing men and women that put this movement together. And I think this is probably the book in my mind that does the best job explaining that.
Yeah. So now, have you had him on your show? That's my first question.
Mm-hmm.
I have tried. He's sort of in a retainer of you. I've reached out to him. He said he would like to, but he's too busy right now. So we'll see.
So you'll like this. I've had dinner with him before. I brought him to the University of Virginia. We hung out. He gave a speech at our little college club, and then I hung out with him. And then I also had him help teach a class. We had a class on conservative theory at the university.
Oh wow!
And he was one of the main teachers there, who gave a 1 hour lecture on this book, just talking exactly about what you did, because I think it's so important, Josh. It can't be understated. What you were saying is, people think of conservatism as things that are self-evident, right? I was just doing the show with the Refounding Fathers, right? With myself, Chris, and Kyle. We were talking about the notion of rights, and Jefferson gave us this whole rights are self-evident, right? Which is nice. It's really good language. It's self-evident, but are they? Is it self-evident what they are? Which ones are, right? Because immediately we were into a debate between Chris, Kyle, and myself of what about a right to stuff, a right to healthcare, a right to goods? Is that a right? Should the Bill of Rights been included? Definitely, it's amazing. Well, Jefferson didn't think so. So right there's debate and discussion about these things, and I think it's the same way with conservatism. Is when you say the word conservative, people are like, conservative, yeah, you vote Republican, yeah, you're right wing, got it. As if it's completely self-evident and there's no diversity or development or any type of back thought whatsoever. And yet here, is this book showing precisely the opposite. So I think it's wonderful. We got to get him on this show. We need to see if he'll have a drink.
Yeah.
Well, I think, like you were saying, Josh, conservatism has a rich tradition of thinkers, both men and women saying wonderful, amazing, thought-provoking things. And yet so often enough, they're not really the popular opinion of even conservatives today. And I know, Wes, before you had ever created the Burkean Conservative, one of your main goals was to create a class about conservatism on youth campus, and hopefully to spread that class around. And that's, I think that also flows back even to C.S. Lewis's Abolition of Man, where it's question your education. And why isn't there a class about conservatism when there's so many other classes about so many other thinkers and none of them are conservative? Like, why are we missing out on this huge gap of our thinking? Let's fill that void. So I think the more that people and young thinkers can place themselves within a tradition of understanding and thinking, they can better understand where they're going and what needs to be thought about now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take a look at some of our comments real quick because we've got several. So Andrew said one of his favorite books is What It Means to Be a Libertarian by Charles Murray. I think that's interesting, right? Because I have a lot of respect for libertarians. And I mean, obviously, we do a show where we have one on there. And I think there's a lot of overlap between most libertarians and many conservatives. But there's also, like, conservatism is also a thing in itself, right? If there was hypothetically no libertarian movement, there would still be conservatives, right? And vice versa. I think there are differences, but you don't know what those differences are unless you're familiar with, the conservative intellectual movement in America and how how those thoughts came to be and how libertarians and conservatives work together over time. So that's kind of what I'm looking at is what are the conservative in themselves type books and what is our thought process independently of, notions of libertarianism. Megan said, I don't know much about these books, but I know American abstract artists took over the art world around the same time. This made me laugh because it made me think of the Abstract Art Museum in DC, which is like one of those terrifying places I've ever been. And I've been to Afghanistan, okay? I've been to Iraq and like all kinds of places. And like, at least there were nice mountains in Afghanistan and like, there was sand in Iraq, you know what it is. But what the hell is that in the Abstract Art Museum and is it going to attack me? There's some abstract art that I can like appreciate because it puts a unique take on things. But I think the entire book of Revelation is like abstract art. But then there's like a weirdness to it that's just like, where's like you were talking about, John, like where's the towel? Where's the truth? Like,
yeah, where's my towel? I need my towel. I remember being in the museum. The only thing I remember there after like waking up out of a coma after I got out of there was a huge eyeball that's like in the corner, just like staring at you around like 4 or 5 different corridors. That was the freakiest thing. Just like I don't care. I don't appreciate it.
Like I like haunted houses, but like this is just making me So that's a great one. So I want to get into mine here real quick, which I think both of you have read before, which is Russell Kirk. I love me some Russell Kirk and especially The Conservative Mind. So I've got this shelf right here of all of his books. And Russell Kirk, to me, better than anyone, put together the different progression of conservatism on time. So while George Nash is right that there is a conservative movement in America and has been since at least the 40s, what Russell Kirk to me does is he connects that movement to a thought process that goes all the way back to Burke, as you see in the title, all the way up to T.S. Eliot, who was a leading, thinker and poet and all that at the time that Kirk really appreciated. Now you could even add more and say that, the conservative movement goes even further than that. But I love the notion of giving conservatism a development and a set of ideas that is evident over time and contributors, with Burke being the one. This is the book that I read in college that introduced me to Edmund Burke and said, you know what, I really like what this guy is putting down. I'm going to get his books and read them in themselves. So it's a great preview. And you find other people along the way, like say John Adams. And there's Russell Kirk explaining how John Adams fits into what's a conservative. One of the things that frustrates me all the time is that we use this term rhino, right? Republicans in name only. And it's like, you're a rhino because you don't agree with me on whatever issue, whether it's like pro-life or, who knows? It could be Russia like it could be anything. You're a rhino. And it's like, okay, I'm a rhino. Like, what are you then? Well, I'm a true Republican. Until you're not, right? Like every time there's been a change in the conservative movement where we immediately outcast all these people and say that they're not really part of it, even though conservatism itself has changed over time, right? Like the conservative movement, the people that voted for Mitt Romney, like, and now Donald Trump, totally different. Like they're completely different guys.
Yeah.
They hate each other, So, but what the conservative mind gives you is here is the boundaries. This is what the conservative movement has been. It's diverse, it's powerful, it's been building over time. it's thinkers. This is what links these people together through history, and it's not this simple thing of like, well, they all voted Republican, so clearly they're no. It's there's so much more to it than that, and it's really easy to read. That's my favorite part. Is like you
Yeah.
could read it in a few days if you really tried. So big words. I don't know. big.
I was about to say, like, it gave me a good introduction to Burke as well. I mean, I tried to read, Burke's reflections on the revolution. I could not get more than 10 pages in. I mean, at the start of it, I was like, I have no idea, like, what frame of reference I need to have here. And then I read, Russell Kirk, and that's what gave me the markers that I needed. And even though I've developed some different perceptions about him, but like it was the markers that I needed to make it through, the reflections that it got me through. Yeah.
Yeah, and Josh, what's your familiarity with it? Like, I'm sure it's a book that you're familiar. I don't know if you've read
Yeah,
it.
yeah, this is one of those when you're asking for favorite books, and I gave you like 10. Then you said, "Oh, we just need one." I think this was on that list. This is a great book. I'm kind of like I'm with you that this is what got me interested in Edmund Burke in the first place. And George Nash said of Russell Kirk that he says that Russell Kirk is primarily responsible for wedding Edmund Burke's philosophy to American conservatism.
Yeah.
But I would go one step further than that. The Conservative Mind is not only a good book and well worth reading, but this is possibly the book most responsible for the entire 1945 to present day conservative intellectual history to begin with. That had it not been for this book, it's entirely possible the three of us wouldn't even be sitting here talking about these people.
That's probably true.
That this took the public by storm, and it's kind of a dense book. But it was extremely popular when it came out, and it just resonated with people. And this birthed a movement and really gave a lot of respect for something that was a kind of a ragtag group of people that were mostly considered extremist.
Because, I mean, and you think about the time, right, that Russell Kirk lived. I mean, you had the Soviet threat, right? You had communism on the rise in so many ways. I mean, people don't think about this now, but like there was a lot of flirtation with communism by America in the early days of the Cold War. There was a lot of people. I mean, there was a reason we had the Red Scare and McCarthyism and all that stuff. A lot of that may have been unfounded, but there was interest. There was a socialist party in America with Dewey. Like there was a growing liberal movement that was flirting with this stuff. And Russell Kirk and the Conservative Mind and Buckley and the National Review, these guys got libertarians and traditionalists and agrarians, communitarians, and all these neoconservatives. They got all these people together and said, hey, we need to figure this out. And this book really helped unite a lot of people. And ultimately, I mean, you have Reagan, coming out of this and leading this group of different Republicans to be able to, stand up and call the Soviet Union what it was, right? And I feel like we need this again. We need a conservative mind today. We need something that links together, the Donald Trumpers and the Never Trumpers and the Libertarians and we need something that brings people together because look at where the Democratic Party is. Look at where liberals are today. So many of them are promoting democratic socialism. Had it not been for, last minute switches and deals, it was very possible that Bernie Sanders could have been the nominee of the Democratic Party, right? So democratic socialists are everywhere in this, and we need intellectual leaders and thinkers in books and material like the Conservative Mind that basically say, hey, let's agree on this. Let's agree on these principles. Let's look at these people, even though if you had them all in a room, they'd probably have disagreements themselves. But there's enough unifying them that we can say, okay, this is our movement, this is our belief system, and this is how we're going to take it to the top to be able to make a difference in this world before it's too late. And I just find it so inspiring and encouraging to have that. And I just think it's something great that people need to reread and then need to think about today. Okay, if Russell Kirk was writing today, how would he write this? What would he change? So that's what's one of my favorite ones. So lots of fun, y'all. A couple more comments. Megan was talking about it's the ideas over the appearance. So I think she's talking about abstract art. And then she appreciated what we talked about with the Conservative Mind, which is really cool. So thank you guys. Maybe there's more. Maybe there's other books out here that we didn't talk about. We'd love to hear that. So message us on the channel if there's another one that you like. I know a couple folks did that already. But yeah, like I think the next thing that we can look at is potentially film. Is there particular movies that have a conservative theme that you guys enjoy, or really get something out of. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And then we could look at some other thinkers in general, some of those that were within the conservative mind, and see which ones did you prefer. Obviously, we talk about Burke. He's one that we love, but it's not just him. I love Tocqueville and, the thought of John Adams and so many others that we can explore. So.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind also being open to us, talking about some film moments that are like maybe some criticisms of conservatism, so that we can acknowledge just the other side and, see what value there is there, because there's plenty of good films that don't always have that conservative basis.
Yeah,
it's worth talking about.
One of the last stories I'll leave you with is I got a chance to go up to Mecosta, Michigan, which is where Russell Kirk lived, and his widow is still alive today, and his daughter, his family still owns property out there. So I got to go tour that whole area. We get to see the places where he wrote The Conservative Mind, hang out there. We got to listen to a guy named Peter Stanlis who met with us, and he wrote books about Burke and was a friend of Russell Kirk and all that stuff. It was really awesome, to be able to see all of that, and it makes it real and it makes it tangible. It's like, man, that's why we do this show. It's like we want people to get interested in. And not just sit there and be angry about liberals, because there's a place and a time for that. But there's more to conservatism than just, we have amazing ideas to explore ourselves. There are things to be excited about that, frankly, attracts more people to conservatism and makes us more effective.
Yeah.
We can do that today because that's what he was a guy. He was a smart guy, but he was a guy who was putting together his books and things like that. So anyway, Hey, thank you guys. That was fun. I've got a little bit more whiskey to drink, but as you can tell, I'm already feeling it, so it's all good. Thank you guys for being on the show. Enjoy the warm weather. Sorry, Josh, that you can't go swimming because it's too warm. It sounds like a personal problem. But no, I always appreciate you on the show, and same for you, John. So again, message us if you've got more topics you want us to get into. Don't forget the BurkingConservative.com, our YouTube channel, our Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, we're on all that, and then our website you can message us on as well. So thank you guys. I will see you next Sunday, and we'll do our next show.